So I had some people that saw the title of the presentation. They said, "What's that about? What's that about?" And so I'll tell you kind of where the inspiration for the title came from, and then how I'm going to apply it differently to this presentation. But years ago, we had an intramural championship game, and one of the officials came off the court, and he said that one of the players had a really good line, and he kind of laughed about it. And the player didn't like a call that one of the officials had made, and he said, "Boy, I hope you guys got good majors." Basically, the implication is you're not very good officials, so I hope you got good majors. So we're going to approach that from another standpoint. We want to approach it from the standpoint is I hope all of you have good majors, because there are some people, there are some success stories that have happened. 2 years ago, we had an official that was in this tournament. Yes, 2 years ago in this tournament, and then this year they refereed games in the NBA as a non-staff official. So there are success stories, but basketball officiating is not something that I think typically people can say, that's what my job is going to be. You don't go to school. Are there any basketball officiating majors in here? Anybody? No. Okay, so I don't think you set out originally to be a basketball official as your career. So I'm not going to say that you want to have a backup plan, because I don't think a career should be a backup plan. You should have some things to do. And then in the case of, and I'll use Jennifer as an example. Jennifer worked for 18 years at Virginia Tech before she got to the point where she had enough games on a consistent basis where she felt comfortable with making that her full-time career. So it's something that you get to the point where you say, I can do this. It's not something that you say, this is going to be my career. There's very few people that can make it a career, and we could estimate, I think Ed and I talked last night when we were riding over to the social, there's 63 officials in the NBA. Those are probably, unless somebody can name some other, those are probably the only full-time basketball officials that are salaried employees in the country. There's probably another 100, 150 in NCAA Division I that have enough games that can make it into a living. Jen just happens to be one of those people. There may be a couple others in here that can do that. Jamie Lucky's obviously one of them that can do that. Doug Shows is obviously one that can do that. But Doug's got a full-time job. And so a lot of those people that could do it still have a full-time job. So we want to kind of talk to you about some things that, as we were all coming up, that nobody really told us. You just kind of found out by talking to other people, but nobody ever formally let you know that what it means to try to be a full-time official, and what it means when you hear the words independent contractor, which is the NCAA Division I level. That's what you are. What are the implications of it? What are some things that can happen? What are some things that you need to know about? And we want you to look at, too, however you come up, going up the ladder as you try to progress your career to whatever level that may be, what are some of the things that come with that? What are some of the things that you need to know about? And what are some of the decisions that you need to make in terms of finding the right balance for you? And that's what it boils down to. What is the right balance for you between officiating, your work, your family, and some of those things? And I happen to have an experience this season that impacted me, that kind of hit it from a reality standpoint. And I know Dana's got some experiences for her. So let's go look at some numbers first. Okay, so we said 63 officials in the NBA, and probably, I'm using rough numbers, about 900 of them on the women's Division I side, 800 to 900 on the men's Division I side. And the men's officials here can comment in terms of the eligibility piece, but in the women's side of things, you have to work 20 Division I games to be even eligible for the NCAA tournament. And Charlene could probably give me this exact number, but I believe it's between 150 and 200 officials are even eligible for the NCAA tournament this year. And that piece right there is the main piece, working 20 Division I games. So if you're not working at least 20 Division I games, that's probably 700, at least of those 900 officials are not working 20 Division I games. So you can't make, for the most part, you can't make a living on working 20 or less Division I basketball games. So I want to do some numbers for it. Doesn't mean you can't get in that group that works it, but it means your odds are not great. And you're against a lot of competition. And like Debbie Williamson once said, in order for you to land your plane, some other people have got to take off. Okay? So, you know, the airport is already backlogged with a lot of planes. So for you to take off, somebody's got to come down and land. Okay, and there's a lot of good officials that don't get that opportunity. Okay, so what does it mean to be an independent contractor? Oh, and the other thing I'll tell you is if you get your name on a college roster, let's say I got on a college roster, what does it mean to make it as an official? We had an official last year that was an All-American in this tournament. He went to camp, he got picked up in a Division II league, he was all excited. Guess how many games he got? 0. 0. So he's a college official, but he got 0 games. Okay, you could get 1 game, you could get 2 games, you could get a few. Jared Pennington got a small number of games this year. He got on a Division II roster. Okay, but it wasn't enough to pay for tuition, I assume. Okay.
To pay for camp, right?
So you got to know that just because you got on a roster doesn't mean you're automatically going to step in there and work the same number of games that Doug Shows is working. Okay? So
and I think some of us, when we have our full-time jobs and we're going through all the video film, tape and breakdown and all that kind of stuff, we're like, man, we have 2 full-time jobs. And and I'm just now getting into the Division I stuff, and I'm like, wow, this is 2 full-time jobs. So we know that it's all like, we got the blood, sweat, and tears going into it. But think about that next level where those guys it is their full-time job and how many hours they're putting into it. And they're all that criticism they're getting, and not all of us can handle that criticism.
So what does it mean to be an independent contractor? We got a couple supervisors in here. So Debbie Williamson, what does it mean to be an independent contractor? What are we paying and what are we not doing as an independent contractor?
Well, you can do whatever you want to, but it's to your advantage to do what we want you to do, and that's the truth. I mean, we know that we don't pay your insurance. We can't really tell you what to do, but if you get the word that I think that you are not in shape, that you're not, that you're running your mouth, you're doing some things that I can't put on a contract, you're probably going to clean things up so that you stand a chance of getting hired. I mean, I did it. I mean, I would do whatever I needed to do to get picked up, but you can do what you want to do, but you're basically, if you're trying to get in, you're looking for what we want you to do. If that makes sense. Now, that's a long list of things depending on who you're talking about, or who you're talking to, or who you're trying to get picked up by. But I don't know a better way to say this. But I mean, I was the camp tramp. I went to every camp I could get into. I mean, I think I went to 5 or 6 camps, even in my last summer. I didn't know I was going to not be refereeing. So I wanted to get in and get picked up. I didn't start till I was 35. I didn't have time to wait around and figure it out. I needed to be soaking up stuff. I went to camps that I couldn't even get picked up at because I wanted to learn. I wanted to do everything I could do. But bottom line is, you're going to want to do, most of us want to do whatever we can do to get where Doug is, where Bobby was. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah. But it also spells out what your compensation is. Spells out in specific terms, and all contracts are different to some degree, but it's going to spell out what you get in terms of usually a game fee, and a lot of leagues now are going to the flat fee deal, and it will also indicate it does not cover X, Y, Z. And it also gives that supervisor discretion. So if Charlene decides that, well, it's not real. I think I've got some good reasons why I want to pull Dana out of this game. She could have given Dana a game or Jennifer a game, and for whatever reason, she, in her best judgment, she feels like she needs to pull her out of the game. She can do that. Okay, so it's not like a regular salary job where a lot of times you've got some things you're protected by either personnel policies or something like that. Or you've got to be given certain types of rationale why changes are made. Supervisors can use their best discretion and judgment to do however they want to do. And guess what? Right now, Dave Gaskins is in no college leagues. Jennifer Rizak is in no college leagues. Dana Lopez is in no college leagues because our contracts are year to year. So there's some factors that can affect where you work, how you work, and how much you work. And a lot of it has nothing to do with refereeing, has nothing to do with your skills. So let's look at a couple of those things.
And I just want to say, what he said, is actually, we put that in our contract, that we have within 48 hours, we can take you off the game. And we never have to give you an explanation. What you need to kind of equate it to is like hiring an electrician. You bring someone in to come work in your home, you don't like their work, you don't call them up and say, I didn't like your work, I'm not gonna hire you again, you just don't hire them again. And that's, when you talk about straight contract work, that's really what it is. So when we talk about feedback, you may not always get feedback from the person who hired you. It's all about, I hire you to do a job, you are responsible for doing the job. I don't like what you do, then I don't give you games, I don't bring you back. Now, I do talk to you, I do give you feedback, but that's what an independent contractor is. And you're on your own, and he's gonna talk about, I don't know what they were talking about, taxes and that whole bit, but you're responsible, and it's a day-to-day, and if you get sick, and you can't work a game, you don't get paid. You have a salary job, you don't get days off. Contract work, you don't get days off. You don't work, you don't get paid. The only other thing I would add is the legal counsel at the conference level has advised a lot of us that we don't tell you some things. That we don't tell you everything that maybe we would want to tell you about what you did wrong, or how I think about this, or how I think about that. Legal counsel has advised us that we be very vague and very general, and, I can't say, I kind of hit on fitness level today. I can't come right out and say, you know what, you need to drop 30. I mean, I wouldn't say that anyway, but I can't say things like that. You know what, I think your judgment is really poor. Now, what I might say is, I've charted your calls, and in my opinion, you were 76% correct. That's really low. But I'm kind of stepping out and doing that too, because for whatever reason, council has advised.
And that's, for us, it's kind of a little bit like, man, you're leaving me out on the ledge, and I just want to know what I can do to get better, what I can do to continue to stay in the conference. And you know what? They got their hands tied as well. And it's just a business, not looking to be your friend and be like, well, if you do this a little bit differently, then maybe next year, something like that. So, that's good to know. I didn't realize that legal had said some of those things.
So let's talk about some of those reasons. So location, and I'll let Dina touch on this one because she's kind of can identify with it.
Sometimes we just can't help where we were born, or where we decided to go to school, or any of those type of things. I have a friend that she used to live in Hawaii, and she she's like, you know what, I'm going to go to the main island, and I'm going to go hang out with some Californians and see if I can get picked up on a conference. And she did that for the past 8 years. And sometimes she got up to the D2, never got to the D1, but I can only imagine, I can't say for certain, I don't know the statistics, so I guess I'll use a Dana-ism. I can only assume that these fellows may have a tough time getting into multiple conferences, just based on the fact of where they live.
And you can say, well, I'll go anywhere, but when Charlene is looking for someone who is 2 hours away, and you live 6 hours away, even though you'll go wherever you want to go, supervisors want to have people that have good geography, where they're in. And so what your geography is can determine how valuable you are to different supervisors. It doesn't mean that people that live in these places, like Bobby said, he obviously had some success living in eastern North Carolina. For us, if we go to the east, we go into the water. There's no schools out there. So it makes a difference. So if basketball officiating, depending on what you can do, a lot of people try to go to larger areas that are near airport. For example, Charlotte in North Carolina is a place that a lot of basketball officials like to live, if that's something that is a priority for them. But depending on your job, that may not necessarily be something that you can do. Okay? Next slide. All right. So supervisor changes. Okay, so we'll use this example because we knew Debbie was in the room. In 2013, 2014, Barbara Jacobs was the supervisor. Okay, so Barbara Jacobs may just love Suyash, just think Suyash is awesome, gave him 30 games in the league. Okay, Well, guess what? In 2014, 2015, we have a supervisor change, and Debbie Williamson becomes the supervisor. And she decides that she doesn't want officials that are over 6 foot that graduated from the University of Maryland. Okay? And so she can decide that. Now, Debbie's not going to do that. Okay? But she can decide that she doesn't like the way you run, she doesn't like your body language, she wants taller officials, she wants shorter officials. She can decide that. And then you might go to 10 games. Okay? So it is at that supervisor's discretion. And what's the saying? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Okay? Some supervisors like different things. It's not right, wrong, or indifferent, but it is the way that it is. So you have to realize that when a supervisor changes, that could impact you positively or negatively just because they like your style, they know you, or they're more comfortable with you, or there's something that they see in you that somebody else maybe didn't see. So that's definitely a factor in terms of how you could, and you can't control that because we don't know when that's going to happen. Debbie, I think I hired in August. So there's probably going to be some things that she's going to change to work with the way she wants the league to be worked in terms of officials. Okay, and Dana pulled this.
The next thing you cannot control is conference realignment. You cannot control where the schools are going to be in which conference. I got picked up into the Big West about 3 years ago, and there was 2 schools in Northern California that all us Northern Californian folks were like jockeying for. And then one of those schools left the following year. So then all of us folks were once again fighting for one school. So my schedule went from 2 games to 1 game, and then I was like, it's probably going to go to 0 probably sometime soon. But we can't control which schools are in our conference, especially, I was in Northern California at the time, and there's some, the bigger conferences are out there, the Pac-12 and the WAC and the WCC, and then we got the Big West, and I think that's about it. So there's 4 conferences that we're kind of like jockeying all for.
And this is happening. Obviously, everyone's really familiar with it happening in Division I, and people are going everywhere. There's no more. You could be in the Atlantic 10 and be in San Diego. They don't respect. There's no respect for the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, and Louisville's in there. Is Louisville anywhere near the Atlantic Coast? So it's all about money right now, and a lot of it's revolving around football and TV revenue or the Big Ten network or things like that. So schools are making business decisions to move into conferences. So if 3 schools that are in the conference that Suyash is working, that he's close to, and then 2 of those schools move and go somewhere else, or I'll use East Carolina as an example. East Carolina was in Conference USA until this last year. And so there are some North Carolina officials in there that were going to go work East Carolina. Well, now East Carolina goes into the American Conference. So now all those officials, their value to that league decreases. And now Debbie has East Carolina on the women's side. And so they've got to impress another supervisor. Okay, now then Debbie's going to also turn around and say, well, now I've got to get some officials in North Carolina to cover East Carolina. So it works on both sides of things, but you can't control that. Okay, so weather conditions. You may make plans, you may have games scheduled, and then snow, ice, we obviously had a lot of that this year. It changes the schedule. You might not be available on the makeup day, or you might be available and now you have an opportunity to pick up some games. And you can't control that stuff. You might get stuck in an airport and not be able to make a game. There was earlier this year, Charlene called me at one point, I need you to be on standby to go to a school because there's an official who may not be able to make it. So we were literally back and forth on the phone as to whether this was going to happen and I needed to be ready to go. So this can affect you on both sides of things. And then I'll let Dana touch on relocation because that's been a factor for her.
So I decided to go from Northern California where there's a lot of basketball, a lot of you get to referee AAU every weekend. Was really established there for about 10 years. All good things. Rob was there with me and we left a pretty good situation, didn't we, Rob? And we moved. I moved to Pembroke, North Carolina. Pembroke is a joke. If you've ever been there, love it. And Rob's in Colorado. So we decided to move a really, really good situation and just go start over for our families, pretty much. And thankfully, I stayed in touch with Gaskins, and he's one of my mentors, so he helped me get reestablished here. But it was really scary, and there was a lot of people whenever I said I was moving to North Carolina, they're like, "Oh, you're moving for basketball, aren't you?" And I'm like, "No, I just want to be close to my mom. I want to have kids. I want to be close to my mom." So I decided to do that, and I was thankful enough. I was lucky enough that I still got some opportunities, and then life happened, and my husband and I got pregos. I want to say that those are sympathy pounds, but they're not. He just likes to eat. And we had a little boy 2 months ago, and that is Dalen. And that changed it changed my life. I knew babies were going to change my life, but once I got a contract from Division I, and I was like, oh my goodness! And I celebrated. I called all my friends. I called everybody. I was super ecstatic. And then I went to the doctor about 2 days later, and I had to call that supervisor. I had to call all the other supervisors too. Just wanted to let you know I really appreciate this opportunity and this contract, but I'm pregnant. So thank you, but thank you. And that was pretty much what I was crying because I knew that this was going to change everything, not just my regular personal life, but I knew that it was going to change basketball's life. And it's going to change basketball's life. I know that. I still have the goal to continue it and keep it in my life, but it may be at a different, there may be some different stuff. I may not get to referee 5 nights a week. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. But life does happen, and you're just going to have to go with the flow. Someone gets sick in your family, you may have to take care of them, or your wife gets pregnant, or you get pregnant, or any of that kind of stuff, and you're just going to have to go with the flow and figure it out. Because basketball, it is important in my life, but now it's not the most important thing in my life. And then Dave.
Okay, yeah, we've talked about that, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so in terms of injury and illness, and Dana made this schedule here for me, allowed me to go ahead and put a schedule up here, and I got a chance to work with Ed Rush on one of the games, and Jennifer, and
we flew you in from Colorado.
Yeah, so it was a good schedule. So I got to a point this year in January where I was working some games, and I was starting to have some pain in my abdomen when I wake up at night, and a couple days later I went to the doctor, and there was no warning for this. Found out I had small blood clots on both lungs, off the court immediately. Fortunately, I was only out for a month, but it was a month, and so the schedule went for a month with X number of games, and then it went to that. And that was Dana's schedule for the whole year. Okay?
I worked half of an intramural basketball game in November, and that's when I realized, maybe I don't even get to do any high school this year.
And so my point is, when we had the arbiter schedule, and your schedule can look like, for example, this, goes down, and then all of a sudden, fortunately, some supervisors let me keep February on my schedule. It goes boom, just like that. Because I made calls to supervisors. I called Charlene, called Tommy Salerno, who's been over here at this tournament before, and I said, look, this has happened. This is kind of what I know. Fortunately, some supervisors worked with me and said, can we do it 2 to 3 weeks at a time? We'll kind of see. So I kept my February. I was able to come back in early February, but boom, just like that. All those games just disappeared right off the schedule. And that's when the reality of how quick and fleeting it can be sometimes will come to you. And some of you may think, I'm 22 years old, and you think you're invincible when you're at that age. And I did. Things like that can happen, but they do. There was an official who was in this tournament 5 or 6 years ago. There was less than 30, and he was kind of full-time official on the men's side, getting a few games in Division I, and he found out he had a rare form of testicular cancer, and he's doing well, but he didn't have insurance. Fortunately, his parents had health insurance. So health insurance is something that is not covered in your contract from these college conferences. So if you don't have it, I would strongly suggest that you make sure you're covered from a health insurance standpoint, because that's not part of a basketball officiating contract unless you're an employee like in the NBA. And it can really add up. It would have cost, without insurance, it would have cost me $7,000 for one night in the hospital. I don't know about you, but that's a lot of money to try to afford without insurance. So you don't want to take risks with that sort of thing, and you need to always be conscious of that. And I'm sure that Jennifer has a health insurance plan that she's on in that contingency. I ran into Nan Sisk years ago in the airport, and she had just recovered from a broken foot, I believe it was, and she said, you know, if I don't work, I don't get paid. I don't get anything, because it's not like sick leave or vacation leave where you're still drawing a salary. If you don't work, there's no money coming in. And that's something that you have to realize with that. Liability insurance, we are, at least at a number of conferences that I have, we have to show proof of liability insurance. Now, your easiest method is Referee Magazine and NASO. That is an awesome perk. In fact, to me, it's probably one of the most important things about being an NASO member is that liability insurance. And we always have to provide proof that we have liability insurance to some of the supervisors by copying that membership card. Okay? Taxes.
Can I say something?
Sure.
So, just so that you are aware, in doing all the research that we had to do for figuring out whether full-time was the way to go, it was talking with a lot of health insurance people, liability insurance, corporations, and those types of things. And when they consider basketball referees, we are at the same risk level as a high-wire circus act performer in their minds. Now, where they compare the two, I have no idea. But you are paying, I mean, every single month, and it obviously depends on your situation, your age, your health, all those things come into a factor. Your family, who needs to be covered. But I probably write a check for almost $1,700 every month for all of those things. Critical illness insurance, liability insurance, health insurance, because I no longer have that by working at the university. So you think, I'm gonna go off the floor and get these nice checks and I got all this money coming in, but it disappears real fast when you're covering those types of things. You gotta put money away for savings, you need a retirement plan, you don't have that anymore, now you're not working at the university. Or your full-time job or whatever it might be. So, and nobody ever said anything about that. You know, it was my friends and colleagues that were doing it full-time that picked up the phone and called me and said, hey, I hear you thinking about doing this. Here are some of the things that you want to think about. So, you know, just keep that in mind. It's a serious component that you need to have. Because if you throw your back out, you blow your knee out, and you just twist an ankle, you know, you're going to lose those games, but you still have to write that check for that
Debbie?
insurance.
Doug, I know, so you make a lot of money refereeing. Buy a special kind of insurance that, will compensate you for games missed, because I know I had an official that I lost February 4th.
Yeah, that's a
And I
one-call
had to give an
game.
account for how many games he missed and what his fees were for that game. And they only paid him a portion of the game fee, but he got something. Can you tell us about that?
There's an insurance policy by K&K Insurance, we can get some information later on, but it's distributed to the gym and all. But, it will cover you in case you are injured, whatever your assignments were, and get a percentage of the, game fees. Now, it's not gonna cover 100%, it's probably gonna be about 50 to 60%, but nevertheless, you have to protect yourself. You talk about preparation, you gotta prepare for worst case scenario and work your way back. So it's very, very important to don't protect yourself from liability, but also disability, sprain your ankle, run out of knee, and so forth for your game. So protect your ability to produce an income going forward.
But that insurance is based on tiers of what you write a check for at the beginning of the year. So there's like, I think 4 tiers or 5 tiers. The top tier, in order to get 60% of your check back, you have to write a check up front at the beginning of the year for almost $2,000. And that could be money you're just out because you're protecting yourself, and never have to use it, but it's insurance, right? So, I mean, it's definitely, and that's one of only a few that are out there that, for officials.
If you go
Nobody
on-
wants to cover us.
If you go on and become a, a Division I official, you're making a pretty nice little income. There's another step you can go to get another personal disability policy as well. But for the meantime, I would check out the K&K insurance.
Yeah.
Keep in mind also, it's only a one-year policy. I went from at the top of my career, 3 years totally out of the game because of a knee issue on both knees. So I was not able to, it's not future income, guys. It's a one-year policy. So if you tear your ACL and the doctor says, you gotta get out of the game, there's no
talking about you can get 5 and some are even 10. There's very few of those, but I mean, we can get you that information if you need it. But I just wanted to make sure there's something you thought about.
Doesn't Mesa do something like that as well?
But they have the
Yeah, it's not to the amounts that he's talking about. And for you at this point, depending on how many, unless you're working the type of schedule that Doug is, or some of the full-time officials that are working at the collegiate or pro level, it's probably not worth it to you at this point. But the NASO policy does have a game replacement fee thing that's probably more appropriate for folks that are not working that level of games or not depending on the income quite the same way. I know Charlene had something to add also.
Quick statement, and it's important, two statements. You need to know the difference between health insurance and liability insurance. Liability covers you if someone sues you, okay? And that's what people a lot of times don't understand. If you don't have health insurance, I'm not asking for your health insurance information, I'm asking for your liability. Because if you do something wrong in the game and somebody comes back and sues all of us, I wanna make sure you guys are covered too. So that's why we ask for the liability from a conference standpoint. The other point I wanna make to you is, and I'm gonna say real quick, as young as you are right now, start your retirement plan now. Start a savings account retirement thing now. Because when I was your age, nobody talked to me about it. I was probably 35 before someone said, you know, you can contribute to your own retirement. And I was working in state systems, et cetera, so I had retirement, but I didn't know I could contribute to my own retirement also. So you need to really educate yourself on retirement stuff, and benefit stuff, and understand the difference between health insurance and liability insurance. And also, having gone through cancer treatments this last year, it's expensive to get sick. People go bankrupt from illnesses. So don't think it can't hit you too soon in your life. Don't think you can skate along and say, well, I'm young and healthy, I don't need health insurance, and somebody goes out here and runs over you on the street. You did need some health insurance, okay?
And we have had officials that has had to use Mesa for games. You know, they had a leak on the roof and I don't know the whole story, but you know, there was a lawsuit that incurred. So I mean, it happens early in your careers. So just be conscientious of it.
So let's touch a little bit on some of the side that you don't see. So it's nice to work college basketball games. Those folks, I know that there's some folks in here that have opportunity to do that. But if you go work say a Division II game, and back in the day when Debbie was refereeing, we would probably do about 10 games a year, and so we rode together a lot of times, and sometimes we were going, 3, 4, 5. I've been 6 hours. I'm sure there's people in here that have been further than that, and those games might start at either 5:30 or 7:30, but then you got to get home. And so you might be getting home sometimes at 3:30, 4 in the morning. If you're flying for some reason, you're staying in hotels overnight, or you might be missing flights. So there's all kind of issues with travel that if you're working a regular job. And I remember working a game at Gardner Webb one year and getting home at 3:30 in the morning. And then my supervisor's been very supportive, but got to be back to work the next day. And I know Debbie drove all over Creation when she was working a lot of Peach Belt and Conference Carolina games, which were Division II, and she would go anywhere. The supervisors loved her because they could send her and she would go and she would work a good job. But you keep doing that over and over and over again. And I know one of the reasons, which she mentioned earlier, that she got out of officiating was because she had kids. She wanted to be there for some of their things. And so there's a price on the family and the relationships that go with that. And Dana's about to kind of get into that situation a little bit as well.
Yeah, the stress on the family part. Yeah, I mean, I'm having to sit here and think, it's different with, officiating than as a woman than it is a man. I just had the kid and everything. So now I have to think about, okay, how much time do I want to spend away from my kid in order to referee these basketball games that are my stress reliever. But then I don't want to go to these games and be stressing out, worrying about, how's my child doing. So, I mean, there's a lot of stress that can be on the family. It can be on your job when you're away. I know that we probably all know bunches of folks that have sacrificed their family to referee. And hasn't turned out in the best way for them sometimes. So, it's got to get, I keep hearing that word perspective, and, putting things, got to put health and all these other things first before you think about going down that path.
What's your job? What's your supervisor require you to do? What are their expectations? In terms of balance, my supervisor has been very supportive, but make no mistake, she expects me to be there most of the week. I can't be gone all week for 4 months out of the year refereeing basketball. I can do that, but I've got to do my job also, and that's the way that it's always been for me. Some other people, if that's what they want to do more of, they find the types of jobs that allow them to do that. Insurance salesmen, folks that can do things while they're on the road. So there are ways to massage it a little bit more, but you got to take care of the things that are primarily important, and you got to decide what that is. But I don't know that there's any statistics, but I've heard the divorce rate among Division I officials is higher probably than it is for the mainstream because of the stress of all that time away from family. And I'm sure that there's some folks in here that could tell you stories of people that made basketball officiating too big a priority for themselves, and it cost them relationships that they can't get back. And like Debbie or somebody said earlier, the game will go on whether we're there or not. So you just have to kind of keep it in perspective and find the right balance that works for you.
I think, just real quick with the taxes thing, if you're reffing high school basketball, obviously they give you a check and then there's no taxes taken out of it. So at the end of the year, the government's going to get theirs. So you need to put away some dollar bills so that you can take care of that when you go to the H&R Block and have to file some stuff. I know most of you, it's your parents, so maybe they're not telling you what they have to do, but eventually you're going to have to pull it out of your pocket to give to them.
And I would recommend that, you find an advisor or somebody, whether it's another official that's already doing it, or, a financial person in your area, somebody on your campus that's really good at that stuff. Because there are ways that you can pay less taxes as a referee than just paying straight out as an independent contractor, sole proprietor. You can do LLC, all those types of things, but it's only what's best for your situation. So what I have done is not going to be the same for anybody in this room. And so I'm trying to do what's best for me and my family as far as taxes go, and so that if something does happen, they can only sue me as Jennifer the referee, and not take my house and everything else that goes with it, right? So, but again, that wasn't anything that I knew about until about a couple years ago. I was just writing, a check to the government every single, here's $20,000, there you go, just take it. And that hurt. I don't know how many of you know how to write a check like that, but it's, but this year, I've gotten around to this year where I didn't have to pay anything in taxes. So you get smarter at it, but I never thought about it when I was sitting in your shoes. If somebody would have told me, think about these things, I might have been a little bit better at it by the time it became an issue.
Right, next slide. And this is another thing that we think that we're all so good that we can control this. To some degree, at some point, you may get into a situation, and this is a story of the game. I'm sure most of you are familiar. I think it was 2012, where the winning basket was scored by a team that had 6 players on the floor. Okay? And you can be, let's just say you can be significantly impacted right in the moment and in the future if you're involved in something like this. And like we've said, there's nobody in here who's refereed a perfect game. So for any of us to think that this sort of thing or something of this nature that gets us in a tough situation with either a coach or accountability in a game, that can't happen to us. And if it does, that's also something that you can't control entirely and may happen to you, and it could significantly impact where you are in officiating.
Can I share something? The clip that you showed this morning, I didn't say anything about that. That happened to be one of my schools. You remember the fight in the girls' game? Nobody knows, but I suspended those officials for 2 weeks. Okay? They didn't handle the situation right, and then they misapplied a rule. When you're switching everybody from the team back onto the bench, somebody must have come off that bench, and we've got to penalize somebody. So, it just happens in the Sun Belt, Mike Wood dealing with it. No. You know what? Those guys for 2 weeks, they made no money from me. So, you know what? There's one of the things that I made if I can penalize an official after the game for an act like that, we want to be able to go back, and that's some of the things, since we don't have instant replay, for us to start looking at the adult thing. That happens at the high school level too, guys.
And it happens, I mean, it happens all the way up. I mean, there was NCAA games this year and last year and years past where Final Four officials were taken out of the tournament because they misapplied a rule or, you know, they didn't handle a situation correctly. And everybody thinks, oh, they're Final Four officials, nothing's gonna happen to them. Well, they were taken out of the tournament and were not eligible to move on and go any further. So, I mean, it's not always a big publicized event that it happens. But, I mean, we're held accountable.
Jen, or any of the other people in here, is there anything you want to share that we haven't already shared as far as what it means to be a full-time official?
The only thing I would say is, you know, you hear all the time that basketball should be secondary.
Yeah, there is one more slide,
It's
I
not the
believe.
most important thing in the world, and, you know, you gotta have, you know, what, family, faith, full-time job, then basketball, right? I mean, in reality's sake, all I'm gonna say is it doesn't always line up that way. I mean, it just doesn't. And if anybody knows about family sacrificing, I mean, my kids, they don't know any different, right? I mean, that's what mommy does. But when I am done with basketball, then things come full circle, right? And they are the most important thing. And so I just, you know, encourage you to think about your situation. Your situation, nobody can be like somebody else. So think about your situation, what is best for you. Right now, where you are, I mean, you're gonna be moving a lot. You got internships, you got co-ops, you got, you know, GAs, you know, full-time jobs that may be coming online. I mean, there's a lot of things that are coming into your mix, and to throw everything into officiating probably isn't very realistic right now. But working where you're working here, coming here, doing these things, going to camps, seeing as much basketball as you can, all of that will benefit you in the long run. I'm thinking about the future. I think Jamie Lucky said, you know, the patience thing that we always say. Today, people aren't very patient. I mean, everybody wants to go from 1 year in, I'm third year in, I still only got 20 games. What's going on? Well, you know what? It took me a long time to get to 20 games. So, I mean, I put in, you know, going on 17 years. I haven't made it to the Final Four, but there were officials that were at the Final Four this year, started after I did it. I mean, you look at those things, right? But you have to look at how can I make myself better, not what they do. Not Robin, Doug, anything like that.
I'll just say prepare, have options. You know, you were in school, you have options with your jobs, your education, same thing with officiating, have options. And you combine those, keep your priorities in order, keep your good head on your shoulder, good things will happen.
Next slide. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up, we talked about balance, you know, finding whatever that appropriate balance is. And I'm going to use Jen as an example. I've always respected how she has kept officiating in balance. And ever since we have known each other, which has been almost the entire time she was at Virginia Tech, she has always talked about the importance of her marriage, her kids. She made sure that she wanted to have a family. And obviously when you're a basketball official, that can impact your schedule to some degree, but it was something that she wanted to do because she knew that it was something that was very important to her. And then she makes time for her family now. So she has made a commitment. When she was working, she made a commitment to the job, whatever her supervisor wanted. And she's kind of kept officiating in perspective and also been very humble as she's reached certain levels of accomplishment in terms of basketball officiating. So balance would be one of the key pieces that I would look at for you. Like we said, basketball officiating is rarely a career that you set out to do. And realize it can be taken away at any time. And there's folks in here that may not realize it, but at any moment something can happen, an injury, an illness, or something like that, that boom, you might not be a basketball official. One day you might work a game and the next day you're done. And it's not always something that you can control. And then the last piece that I'll say, unless people want to add anything, is I hope you've got good majors. Anything else from anyone else?